Spending $15 billion on a 16-day party sounds crazy, right? Now, imagine that the party is over. You are left with massive empty buildings that nobody wants, a mountain of that, and a city that's actually worse off than before. Yeah, for decades that has been Olympic dream. But today the dream is turning into a survival mission. So are we watching the peak of human achievement or just the world's expensive mistake?
Tidily done, did hold for a long time.
While they don't get as much global attention as the Olympic Summer Games, the Winter Olympics have officially started. Right now, the torch of Olympics is burning in the Italian Alps and the Milan streets. Athletes are chasing the gold medal in the snow, but if you look at the past of the sport, there's a much bigger story happening. The Olympics aren't just the games, they are massive urban experiments. Actually, for a long time, hosting the games was a way for a country to show off its power. But behind of these beautiful skylines, there's often a messy reality of dead and empty buildings. Right now, today, we are looking at the Olympic equation to see how these games change our cities and why the current one in Italy might finally change the rules forever. But before we talk about the money, we need to talk about the stage. To understand why the cities spend billions today, we have to look at the history of Olympic architecture. Let's go back to where it all began. The Panathenaic Stadium in Athens. When you see it, you immediately feel its weight. It was built entirely of white marble. The message was loud and clear. The Olympics are eternal. This stadium was not just a sports venue. It was a bridge to the ancient world. It set the standard what an Olympic stadium should look like. Be monumental and built to last forever. But for the next 100 years, most of the stadiums were just variations of this giant concrete ball. Then came Munich 1972 and everything changed. This is one of the most important moments in Olympics architectural history. Germany wanted to erase the memory of the 1936 Berlin Olympics, the ones used for Nazi propaganda.
They were days of glory.
They didn't want heavy, intimidating stone buildings. Instead, an architect named Fray Otto created the Olympia Park. He designed a massive see-through tent roof made of glass and steel cables that looked like it was floating over the hills. It was light, it was airy, and it was full of sunshine. This wasn't just a cool design. It was a way for Germany to say, we are a new, open, and transparent democracy. It proved that architecture could change the way the world looked at a whole country. So if you enjoyed the video so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. But as we moved into the 21st century, the message became more about ego and power. We entered the era of these super buildings. Take Beijing 2008 and the famous bird nest. This isn't just a stadium, it is an engineering miracle. It used 42,000 tons of steel beams woven together to look like a giant nest. It was meant to show that China had arrived as a global superpower that could build things no one else even dreamed of. But building a giant piece of art that can also hold 90,000 people is incredibly hard. Every beam had to be custom made. The complexity was off the charts and so was the cost. Just 4 years later, London 2012 took it step further with Zaha Hadid's Aquatic Center.
I was first inspired by landscape and topography and liquid space.
The roof alone weighs 3,000 tons, but it only rests on 3 points. I admit that it's breathtaking, but here is the problem. When you design something that's never been built before, you can't predict the cost. These super buildings became the new gold standard. Every city wanted a bird nest or a Hadid curve to show they were a world-class city. But as the designs got more futuristic and the engineering got more complex, price tags didn't just go up, they exploded. That's the exact point where the Olympic equation started to fall apart. But what happens when the cameras turn off? Ideally, a city spends billions of dollars and gets a brand new neighborhoods in return. But more often than not, they get stuck with what economists call white elephant. These are massive, incredibly expensive, giant buildings. Probably they have no use after the Olympic Games. Come and let's look at the Athens 2004. Greece spent nearly $11 billion to get the Olympic Games. They built world-class arenas for sports that almost nobody in Greece plays. Today, many of these venues are just rusted, overgrown, and covered in graffiti. The pools are empty and stadiums are locked. But the worst part, Greece had to borrow this money. Many experts believe that this massive Olympic debt was one of the big sparks that led the country's total financial collapse a few years later. They built monuments, but they paid the bill with their future. So here is the question that comes in my mind. Is it worth bankrupting a country to host 2 weeks organization? Then we have Rio 2016. Rio promised that the Olympics would fix these problems. But months after the closing ceremony, the Olympic Park became a ghost town. The electricity was turned off because nobody wants to pay the bill. And here is where the mathematics gets really scary. Since 1960, every single Olympics has gone over the budget. On average, the final cost is 122% more than what initially promised. Think about that for a second. If you plan to spend $100 on a dinner and the bill comes $222. Now imagine that with billions. If the costs are too high and the stadiums end up empty, why do cities keep bidding for the Olympic Games? This is the opportunity cost. Actually, I'm not an economist and this is a huge topic for another video. But I can say that this is a term for a simple idea. Every dollar spent on a stadium that sits empty is a dollar that didn't go to the people. That 11 billion in Athens could have built hundreds of modern schools or dozens of high-tech hospitals. In Rio, that money could have cleaned up the water or fixed the failing public transport system. When a city builds for a 16-day event instead of building for the people who live there for decades, it's not just an architectural choice, it's an economic tragedy. Yeah, I know it's easy to look at the empty buildings and think that Olympics are always failure, but that's not the whole story. When a city focuses on people instead of events and organization, the result could be different. For example, Munich 1972. Before the games, the site was basically a giant pile of rubble and old airfield left over from World War II. But instead of just building a stadium and leaving, Munich created the Olympia Park. They turned that wasteland into a massive public park with hills, a lake, and walking paths. And here is the amazing part. Over 50 years later, the people of Munich City use this place in every single day. It's a place for concerts, Sunday walks, and community events. It didn't just host the Olympics, it became the heart of the city. Munich proved that if you design for the citizens first, the architecture lives forever. But always there is a dark side of these kind of transformations. Often to build these kind of new and improved neighborhoods, the old ones have to be cleared away. In Rio 2016, thousands of families living in the favelas were forced out of their homes. Some were given very little money and told to move to the far outskirts of the city, far away from their jobs and communities. In Tokyo, we saw heartbreaking stories of elderly residents who had lived in the same rent-controlled apartments for 50 years. They have been evicted to make room for Olympic plazas. And even when people aren't forced out, they are often priced out. This is called gentrification. The Olympics make an area so cool and expensive. The original residents can no longer afford to live there. So is it really a success story if the people who lived there before cannot afford anymore? The history of the Olympics is a tug of war between creating a public legacy like Munich and causing social displacement like Rio. This brings us to right now. Milano Cortina 2026, the Winter Olympics. This year, Italy is trying to do something differently. They are calling it the Smart Games. Instead of building massive new buildings, they are using what they already have. Actually, 93 of the venues being used right now were already built or are just temporary. They are even using the Arena di Verona, a Roman stadium that's almost 2000 years old, for the closing ceremony. Why build something new when the Romans already built the perfect stadium? Even the athletes village in Milan is already planned to become the student housing as soon as the games are over. So the Olympics are at a turning point. The days of bigger is better is officially over. I think the future is not about who can build the tallest stadium. It's about who can leave the smallest footprint. And of course the Olympic Games are not gonna disappear. But the era of everybody being able to afford them, that's probably over. So Milano, one of the biggest tests. And yeah, here is a real question. How many more cities are willing to pay these bills?